Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to the Shift's second Mental Health Movies in the Making event online, Real Pride, promoting mental health in LGBTQIA plus narratives. And this is a panel and Q&A, so we hope that you've brought lots to ask or that you come up with some questions along the way. And we'd love to know what industry you're actually joining us from, if you don't mind dropping that in the chat, and also maybe what city. We've got the chat open here at the top, and just love to know if you're a filmmaker, a mental health professional, or maybe an educator, or a big movie buff. Maybe you're a writer, director, actor. Let us know, and let us know where you're coming from. I am here in Los Angeles. I'm one of the co-founders of The Shift, and I can't wait to welcome our panel hosts and panelists coming up in a little bit. Let's see, what do we have? Quentin Lee is in the house. He'll be joining us soon. Anthony Meindl. And we're just so happy to have everyone joining. And we are diving into today what it looks like to really shape and help create narratives around the LGBTQ plus experience while promoting mental health in the process, both on screen and in the process of actually creating. So we're delighted to be able to bring this opportunity together to showcase storytellers and filmmakers, creators who are bringing these conversations to screen. A shout out to the mighty production team, of course, behind this event. We've got producer and co-founder of The Shift, Nadia Sarmova, and associate producers Lindsay Jimenez and Sam Crowell in the house. Thanks for making all this happen in the background. For those of you who are joining The Shift for the first time, hello. The Shift produces, just so you know a little bit about us, The Shift produces mental health themed content and events, and we partner with filmmakers, creators, and organizations to help them tell mental health stories with care and with authenticity. And we're dropping something in the chat, a PDF for you, in case you want to learn more about how we do that. We also recognize that conversations around different topics and certainly around the Pride, LGBTQ community can activate certain, questions or conversations that can use some support. So we like to share the crisis text line when we start any panel conversation. You can text the word hello for 24/7 access to a conversation that can support you if you feel like you have that need. So I want to move into really the conversation we're here to celebrate today, which is really all the great strides that have been made and have changed around the world and around our country over the years when it comes to the conversation around sexuality and identifying where we really feel like we fit in. And it's a very personal journey for everyone. And in some areas it's changed a lot and there's a lot more room for this conversation. And others, you might feel like, wow, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we're still stuck in certain challenges that, we're really here to help acknowledge and address and discuss today. And to help lead the way, I'm so honored to have Andy Lalwani come back to The Shift after having led so many conversations in the past with us. He's been a Shift starter on Instagram with us. And Andy, we really are excited to have you. Let's see if there we go. You're dropping in. Hello, Andy. It's so good to see your face. And I just want to give you your proper introduction. You, of course, are best known for covering some of the biggest entertainment stories online for publishers like What's Trending and MTV and Reverie TV, and recently even launching your own podcast called The Pop Report, which you are celebrating really that it's become a top 20 Apple podcast within the first week of launch. So that's huge. And you were so generous with us at The Shift to share really some personal stories around your experiences coming out and understanding and uncovering who you are. And we just really are so honored and thrilled to have you back to host this conversation. So with that, Andy, I'm going to turn this over into your capable hands and let you lead the way from here.
Oh, what kind of words? Wow, it's always wild to hear like someone talk about you in that kind of way, but thank you so much for those kind words. And welcome everyone to the Shift's Real Pride Promoting Mental Health and LGBTQIA plus narratives panel and question and answer. So a big welcome to our amazing panelists today, Quentin Lee, Anthony Meindl, and Xavier Rombaut. Xavier's joining us kind of remotely. He recorded some thoughts he wanted to share as he couldn't make it to this as he's in Belgium. So, the time zones are a little different and he's about around 2 a.m. right now, just casually getting some shut-eye at the moment. But he has recorded in spirit. So that being said, thank you for everyone coming today to talk to us about your efforts, your process, your takeaways as filmmakers who have created stories about LGBTQ plus themes and doing that with some, big success. I'm also excited to hear a lot more about this with all of you. And for everyone joining, we're dropping panelist bios in the chat now, so you can get to know these filmmakers just a little bit more. And it'll give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourself after we play a quick look at a few moments from each of your films.
For most of my life, growing up in this strange world, I've been trying my best to fit in. Our parents wanted us to be perfect. They had an image of what perfect should be. 'Cause you know what? Everyone is different.
Ça va? Ga je mee?
Dat waar.
Ah, ik moet naar Radio 2, hè.
Ja, ik wou nog studeren.
Zeg, kerel. Ik zou met u een keer over iets willen spreken, zo tussen ons, hè. En nu dat uw broer toch ook zo een serieus lief heeft. En jij en Valerieke het wel, hè. Allee. Je bent ervoor nog veel te jong, hè. Maar mama wou toch dat ik daar met u al een keer over praten. Dus, moest ik al iets doen of... Allee, dat zijn mijn zaken niet, maar gewoon dat je voorzichtig bent.
My grandma had Alzheimer's, and sometimes when we played her favorite old school songs, she would just transport back to that time. I thought it was worth a shot.
Ntombami ndibonile ngoku bendiskeyita.
Ewe mama, ndibonile.
Bendiskeyita kakuhle.
Kahle kakhulu mamsi.
Njenge-professional.
Number one.
Amazing. Now, I want to welcome our panelists. Before you obviously get a chance to answer any questions, I want you to get a chance to introduce yourself to the audiences. So I know you, but I'd like for them to get to know you as well. If you can give just your name, what you do for a living, basically your title, and your film.
I'm Quentin Lee, and I'm a filmmaker, producer, director, and writer. And I've kind of went to film school in 1993 at UCLA Film School. So I've been doing this for 30 years have made like maybe about 8 or 9 features and created 4 television series.
It's fine. Congrats.
I'm Anthony. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Andy, for moderating, and Mo did such a great intro. Yeah, I'm a writer-director, and I'm also known as an acting teacher. I have schools all over the world, and I've taught a lot of really incredible actors, and I guess that's my introduction or foray into the work. I've been teaching for 30 years, and yeah, I just finished a movie that we traveled all over the world for last year, including shooting in Taiwan and India and South Africa and Namibia. Look it up if you don't know where it's at, in Canada and Greece. So I'm really excited about social conscious filmmaking and international storytelling. So that's what I'm maybe here to talk about vis-a-vis LGBTQ topics and mental health stuff.
Nice. And obviously, I want each of you to be able to explain your films that we're talking about here. So if you can share a 60-second overview of your film and just what led you to center your film around the specific topic.
Okay, so my
Sure.
film was White Frog, and it was made in 2011. I was actually a director for hire, hired onto the project by these writers who created a story about a kid who is on the spectrum, who has Asperger's, and his older brother suddenly dies, and he kind of has to come to terms with his brother's death. And in the journey of that, he finds his voice and also finds out that his older brother is gay. So it's a coming of age movie, and it's a queer movie, and it's also a movie about the coming of age of a kid on the spectrum.
Cool. Quentin, I want to see that. I love that he's on the spectrum. I didn't know that because I haven't seen it yet, but I finished, I guess I was thinking today, I was like, wow, as a queer filmmaker, as a queer person, and I guess a lot of my things have been queer centered. My first short was kind of like an autobiographical film about myself trying to be a cheerleader in Northwest Indiana in the 1980s or 1970s. I'm dating myself. And I did a movie a couple of years ago that we shot that I ended up selling to Hulu that is called Where We Go From Here. And it's 3 stories. One of them is about the Pulse nightclub shootings that occurred in 2016. So it's really about gun violence. So the movie you just saw clips from is called Memento Mori, and it's basically 6 love stories that take place all over the world that all culminate in a climate crisis. So, as I said, I'm really interested in centering what it means to be a human being in all its variety in the world we're living in right now. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. And thank you so much for both of you for explaining it. I am very excited for everyone to learn more about both your films. But before we continue further, I want us to hear from Xavier.
Good evening, everyone, and greetings from sunny Belgium. My name is Xavier Rombaut, and I'm a producer at Polar Bear, an outfit that I started in 2018. I've been producing myself since 2006 for other companies, and last year we produced Young Hearts, Anthony Schatman's first feature. Young Hearts tells the story of Elias, a young guy that lives in a small town somewhere in Belgium. And he has this quite normal life, enjoying himself with his friends. He has a girlfriend as well, Valerie. But all of a sudden, everything changes when his neighbor arrives. He has a new neighbor, Alexander, and he starts to develop feelings for him. He has some difficulties in expressing his feelings, but with the help of his family and the people around him, he's able to be honest with himself and with the people around him. For this film, started in 2020. It was Anthony actually who had the idea, and he came to me about the story of first love and about coming out. And I was immediately attracted to the idea because I think it was a good combination to broaden up the topic to a broader audience, because everybody can relate to first love and to the mixed emotions that first love has and will create within someone, but also the coming out issue was something that was never been told before in such a positive way.
Well, great to hear from everyone about their films. Now, obviously, it is Pride Month. Happy Pride. For those of you who obviously would like to know information about Pride, we'll definitely give you some more information later on. Hearing from the two of you, I have a two-part question to be answered. So I'd like to hear from the two of you, what challenges or what do you say specifically we have as challenges every year for Pride? Is there anything that we should steer away from for Pride? But also, what do we celebrate most about Pride? You know, what are the things you love the most?
Can I start with what I love the most? Was I remember when I came out, it was probably, and it was like 1991 or something, or 1990 in San Francisco. And I remember like going to my first Pride fair in San Francisco, and it was amazing. It was free and it was like super fun. And that was something that I really look forward to. Then I came out to LA, and then you had to go pay to go to the Pride fair. So it's kind of like, for me, it's just really annoying, but it filtered out a bunch of like young people who wouldn't have like 20 bucks to go to the Pride fair. So I think that what I really love about Pride is it's this kind of like this almost like amazing free activity that everybody can participate. Yet I really dislike about Pride is that it has become much more commercialized, and in that way it filters out a lot of people that really need to go to these things.
Yeah. Anthony, what about you?
I mean, I think Quentin brought up a really good point that made me think, like, yeah, it's become commercialized. I guess, you know, you've made it as a demographic if all of a sudden it's sponsored by, you know, Red Bull and Budweiser or something. Although I think actually Budweiser maybe is not such a great example, because I think they tried to do a promotion with a trans activist and it backfired on them. So that just goes to show you, you know, how, I guess, how challenging it still is for corporations to be inclusive and to show, again, really what it means to be a human being. I guess Quentin, maybe we're around the same age. I think I was in grad school in London. I think that's where I kind of came out. I remember making out with a guy in like some subterranean basement bar at Sloane Square. And then that summer, I think I went to some sort of gay pride festival, or maybe it was the London Gay Pride Festival. I don't remember. It felt small to me, but then when I moved to New York City, it was such an overwhelming experience of like, oh wow, this is my tribe. And I think for me, something that I just thought of that I thought was so cool. My niece is 15, and I just got back from Europe. I was in Europe during LA's Pride, and she texted me photos of herself. She's like, look, Uncle Tony, I'm on a float at Gay Pride. And she's not gay, but she's such an ally. And for her generation, it just seems like, who cares? You know what I mean? It's such a beautiful celebration. So I found that to be really amazing, and what a wonderful celebration.
Yeah, it's definitely, we've had a lot of support of people who support Pride over the years. There's a lot more trans awareness that have come over the years. It is difficult sometimes of those people who have access to Pride, and, you know, the commercialized, you know, sensationalism of Pride, which you brought up earlier, which is like a big thing that's been kind of spoken out for a lot of people. You know, it varies city by city, from like very rural prides to very city-esque prides. It changes from what's the demo there, what you can see. But great points you both made, which transitions us into both of your occupations as filmmakers. When it comes to Pride, you know, obviously storytelling is very important. We're in Pride Month. Do you have any specific challenges you can name? Obviously, there probably are a few, and getting any LGBTQ plus stories made for the big screen?
I mean, I think as a filmmaker, as a producer, as a creator of any type, anybody who's on here listening, or I think it's hard to get anything made, period, full stop. And especially in our more and more corporatized, you know, everything is being a corporation within a corporation within a corporation. It's like the Russian, what do you call it? Those the Russian dolls, you know. I think everything is becoming homogenized and corporatized. So I think it's a very strange time. I think I feel like I'm naive about queer storytelling, that it's really accessible in a larger space. And I realize like that's just maybe because of the world that I live in, but I think it is really difficult. You know, I think it's changing, but like all things, I think a corporate mentality is always looking for something that is going to make money. And I think a lot of tech companies, because a lot of it's being run by tech nowadays, or executives don't always see that that equate a gay storyline is going to equate as being profitable.
Yeah, I totally agree with Anthony, because obviously with any type of filmmaking, funding is really the most major challenge. And back when I was going to film school in 1993, not only for LGBTQ plus material, but for any movie that with a Black protagonist or with an Asian protagonist, and you basically cannot, if you plan to write an independent feature film in the 90s with a person of color protagonist or a queer protagonist, you can never even pitch it to the studios. But I feel like now things have gone a lot better, that you can it actually has happened. Like, I'm glad I stayed in the game for 30 years. So finally I'm able to pitch like, hey, I want to make a queer series, to Netflix. I want to do. So I think that, things have gone a lot better, and it's there are always going to be challenges in financing a project. But I think that the climate for diversity, it's much better now, that it's much easier to get anything with, a minority kind of theme into production than before when I started, which was impossible.
Yeah, you actually kind of lead me into this follow-up question I had for this based on your responses too. Do you agree that there's a better reception to a lot of this type of media, or how do you feel these audiences are reacting to LGBTQ plus media these days compared to in years past?
I think definitely. I mean, like something like Queer as Folk, it's just even like, Queer as for Straight Guys. These are like really mainstream shows that, featuring like very queer protagonists, and just like Crazy Rich Asians, or you have like Atlanta, these really successful kind of like people of color or queer shows. And I think that we just have to ride on that wave and keep continuing to create these diverse content.
I agree with what Quentin's saying. I mean, I guess the question is how they're being received. I mean, I don't know. It's tricky. I think we also live in a bubble. We live here in LA, right? Or you live in New York. And I wonder if a queer story, and I come from the Midwest in a very small town, I don't know if that's going to play. We used to have a little cineplex, a quadplex in my hometown in Indiana. It's not there anymore. I don't even, to be able to even access independent filmmaking is becoming more and more difficult. Sure, a Marvel movie is going to go into some space, but so I don't know. I think young people obviously want to see a reflection of themselves. And so that's really inspiring and hopeful. But I always think that there's, I'm very optimistic because there have been groundbreaking stories being told forever. I love TCM. Maybe I'm just showing my age, but Turner Classic Movies for all you youngins out there. But I just watched Torch Song Trilogy, which I'd never seen the movie version of it. Like I've worked on the play with people, with students and actors, but I was so blown away by Harvey Fierstein's, like, oh my gosh, his vulnerability and his commitment and his passion. And that was, I think that movie was 1981. So I think there's always going to be trailblazers who are going to center queer stories and diverse stories, as Quentin said, that are really needed. So good for us.
Yeah, no, seriously. We also heard from Xavier about his own project too, just for everyone's context. So Young Hearts is screened in over 10 film festivals, winning several awards, including the Crystal Bear at the prestigious Berlin Film Festival, and audiences worldwide have embraced the positivity of Young Hearts with what he says is a lot of enthusiasm. So we have had a lot of changes. We've had a lot of people looking for more queer media, looking for more things of, does this look like me? Do I see myself on screen? Do I feel like my voice is being represented? That being said, it follows into our next question. I want to ask the two of you, what responsibilities do filmmakers have in portraying LGBTQ plus characters and stories authentically and respectfully, especially pertaining the mental health and emotional health challenges?
I think it's a very interesting question. It also points out to the kind of current blind spot of diversity. And it's funny that sometimes when I'm now applying to some, in Canada, Telefilm Canada grants, things like that, and they would ask you, oh, can you fill out a statement to explain why your production is diverse, or why you have to tell the story? And I was like, well, because I'm queer, or I'm like API, and this is kind of my story.
Right.
So I think that you have to kind of look at how this question comes from. Is it come from someone who is not part of that community and kind of like question you why you're saying this, or is it coming from someone who is part of that community? I think that right now we're still struggling in how to administer diversity in some way. And I think that's something I think that you really need more kind of like diverse executives in the greenlighting process to be able to feel like, okay, I know this is an authentic story, this is not an authentic story, or this director is going to be doing a lot, doing research, and it's like a really kind of like, it could potentially open up a can of worms about how we are looking at and administering diversity at this point in time, which potentially is problematic, but it's a little bit better than before.
I mean, I don't know if I have much more to add. I guess my thing that I was thinking about, I think Darren Aronofsky said something, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something, to be a filmmaker, especially in this day and age, if you don't have something to say about something, then why are you telling a story? And I do think that that is really important in queer filmmaking, but as Quentin so eloquently put it, in really representing diverse storytelling as well. I guess, again, coming back to the corporatization of things, which to me scares me, like big tech taking over. I think homogeneity is something that we're going to have to keep fighting against, because there's something that was said recently that streamers and companies are looking for blue sky scenario kind of storytelling, which means they don't really want to look at things that are provocative or evocative or things that are a reflection of what we're really dealing with in society. And for me, those are the only movies that I'm really drawn to. I mean, I can appreciate an escapist movie, but that's not really what inspired me to write or create or work with artists. So I think it's really important that we keep finding, channels to tell stories about centering ourselves in what it means to be human today.
Absolutely. And it's definitely important, obviously, to represent specific voices in the communities and detailing, the trans experience by someone who is trans, and like being able to obviously storytell in the ways that our community wants to be represented. So thank you both for sharing those thoughts. We also have some thoughts from Xavier on this one.
The responsibilities that we have as filmmakers in portraying LGBTQ plus characters are actually quite the same responsibilities that we have in portraying other characters. I think the most important thing to do is to create in the writing, in the filming, an authentic character, some character that people can relate to, and that's the most important thing. Anthony Schatman, the director, is a queer filmmaker himself, so a lot came from his own inspiration and his own experience. So the film always stays very close to the things that he experienced. It's a little bit even semi-biographical, but he and his experiences were the biggest references in the film.
Shifting gears a little bit as we dive into another part of this conversation about choices. Obviously, everyone has specific choices they make in a film, to how it's stylistically shot, to who are we partnering with. I want to ask you both, and obviously Xavier has some things to say about this as well. How did the subject of your film influence your process? That being said, some examples would be, did your production team's mental health approach a little differently than others? Or how are your production partners in this based on some of the storytelling in this? What was your creative process based on some of the measures of emotional well-being for some of your storylines and more? But obviously, what choices did you make while trying to detail the best storytelling here?
I'm going to give a general answer. I think like a lot of topics, people are scared to talk about them because they don't know how. And that is also part of what stigmatizes and continues to hide or create shame around whatever it is, from queer identity to, again, the climate crisis. I think people want to talk about these things because we're not living in a bubble. I mean, some of us are in our echo chambers, on our phones, but I think people are aware of, we're empathic beings. So I think that for me, the space as a filmmaker, not just on set, but hopefully in the storytelling, is that it's creating a space like this, like what you guys are doing, where we can have a really cool forum to talk about, oh my gosh, I feel that way too, but I don't know how to say it, or I'm really scared, or is there something wrong with me? And I was just going to say, the last point is, my producer, who's really amazing, her name is Cyrilina, when we met, she even told me, she said, I'm of course aware of the climate crisis, she said, but until I really started spending time with you and really immersed herself in the storytelling, I don't think she really grappled with the impact and the importance of it in a way that I'm hoping that, a wider audience is going to get. And I think that's important.
So important. Quentin, you were definitely going to say something on this.
Yeah, so it was very coincidental that when I was making White Frog back in 2011, that my sister, my sister, who was then around like 29, 30, just sort of like also was diagnosed with Asperger's. And for many years, we were thinking, oh, what was wrong with her? But somehow, and obviously at that point in early 2010, 11, the whole Asperger label was basically being subsumed into the autistic spectrum. So there were all these things going on, and it was great that when I was exploring the project and the role with my young protagonist Boo Boo Stewart, my young actor Boo Boo Stewart, who's playing this character, we researched a lot, and we both watched a lot of YouTube and trying to figure out how to represent the story about this kid who has this Asperger's. So I think most interesting is for us to dive into this character's point of view in a very subjective level, thinking about like these having like being on the spectrum and being autistic, and how is it to portray it. So and this process, I think, is really made me learn a lot about how to create a role, and also learned a lot about what it's like to be on a spectrum. So it was both an education thing, and it was just also a lot of fun. And I think that's what really filmmaking is about, is to create a subjective and a very personal story with a particular kind of mental health state,
Yeah, and
a
it seems
mental
like
health
you're
condition.
very, very conscious with your decisions. And so for all of your projects too, for both the examples you've given, you're making sure, you're doing the research, you're also taking it into account for your project and making sure everyone is not just, aware, but also understands how this can portray out for someone who's watching this and also wants to learn, even through watching your film. So thank you both for that so much. And let's also hear from Xavier on this.
Because we worked with teenage boys and the theme of coming out and sexual identity, of course we took some measurements on set and the preparation of the film and pre-production, but also during the shooting. For example, there was always a coach on set, but also a psychologist. With whom the main characters, but everybody actually, also the crew, they were able to talk to. I think it's very important to have a person on set which is not connected to the production company and not connected to the production department, but really somebody external. Who can create a safeguard and who can create a safe space around the set and the whole team. We had this person available 24/7, and he was there when we did the workshops with the boys at the very early stages, when we worked with the other children, but also during shooting. And sometimes were only small things that needed to be discussed, but the reason that he was there and that people knew that he was there and that he was available to talk to in a private way was a big asset for this film. And even at later stages, we took him with us. For example, in Berlin, he was there as well because it was so overwhelming. And also, when you look at social media and when you look at the reactions of the media and the users of social media on Lou and Marius, it's incredible. I mean, those are really children. They are 15 years old and they really needed to be protected or at least guided. So it was very important to have him on set. And actually, it's something that we do on every set. Not only on this set where we shot with children or where we were shooting around mental health issues or the LGBTQ plus team. No, I think it's something that is really needed in every company, and especially in film shooting, where there's a lot of stress sometimes, there are a lot of emotions, a lot of different ages, big hierarchy between different ages. I really think that we need these kind of people in every way possible.
Xavier brought up some good points too about how stress can obviously be affecting a lot of different productions and how you obviously like manage that with your team and also apply whatever you have going on into the learnings of trying to portray what you have on screen. So thank you so much for everyone for sharing their insights. Shifting to another focus, I know a lot of people probably are coming out of this, or maybe people are watching this saying, how can I do this myself? How can I make sure I'm doing my best storytelling? So my best question to two of you is, what advice would you share with our audience as they work on their own projects or consume content that highlights mental health themes within the LGBTQ plus communities or beyond?
I'll just say, and I wanted to piggyback maybe a little bit on what we were talking about earlier, because when Quentin was talking about his sister, I don't want to speak for other filmmakers, but I do think whether it's conscious or unconscious, we're all kind of working through, I can only speak for myself, autobiographical. It's all autobiographical. So even though in this movie, there's 6 different stories instead of 6 times 2 is 12 actors, and they're all different stories, they're all still a prism of me in a way, because I think the beautiful thing about art is it's a reflection of our own stuff, trying to create meaning of life, trying to answer questions or ask the questions, whether it's conscious or not. And I guess that for me is an answer to the question of younger people or people at any age who are, oh, I'd like to create something or write something or do something. What's the saying? Write what you know. And I think we underestimate that we are interesting, or that we have interesting stories to tell as ourselves. And I work with actors all the time, and when I'm telling them that they fundamentally as themselves are interesting to watch, it's a very hard thing to get them to trust that, because I think we're told that it has to be filled with like fireworks and like, I don't know, sound effects of things to make us interesting. And it's actually just the opposite. So that's kind of my advice, is trust yourself.
I feel like, we are artists first, and it's not us to be an educator. So when I'm making a film, I'm writing a story, I'm not trying to write an essay and to tell you, hey, these are the effects of this. If you're in this mental health condition, what are you supposed to do, blah, blah, blah. I think that the role of an artist is to be able to trust yourself and trust your artistic instincts, but to work with this whole larger kind of like mental health research framework of what you're trying to say. It relate to this theme, but really to also take that artistic leap to create something that is compelling and entertaining for another person to watch and for you to create. So I think and it's kind of balancing both, right? You have to do all your research correctly and work with all the right people that are kind of like, part of this community. Yet at the same time, as a director or filmmaker, you have to take that artistic leap to say, hey, I'm going to make the story my own so that you can enjoy.
Absolutely.
And Andy, can I just say, I think Quentin is saying so many good things that I always want to piggyback. Like, I think, as you said, I think the responsibility for the artist is to tell the story within them, or the story that lights them up, or that they're inspired to tell. I always say, tell or write or create the thing that you wish existed. And it's not our responsibility. Like, once you've done the movie or whatever permutation of a piece of art is that you're releasing to the world, you have no control over how people respond. And some people may hate it for the very reasons why you wanted to make it. It may be confronting and challenging or scary. And, everybody's at their own level of awareness. So it's none of our business once you tell the story that you have to tell. And I think that's really important. I think sometimes creators they try to like straddle both sides of the fence, which then makes it diluted filmmaking in a way. You have to be brave to tell the story you want to tell.
Yeah, and we also should not forget that it wasn't until 1973 homosexuality is still considered like a mental disorder by the psychologists, right? So
Right.
really, it wasn't until culture starts to change that our sciences of what we consider to be objective kind of incorporates a different perspective. So I think for us as artists, we walk in the more cultural side. So it is our responsibility to creatively push the boundary of culture so that the general culture and scientific framework can change and be more open.
Now, we're going to shift to some questions that have been coming in through this time. So we have some questions specifically geared to each of you that I'll be able to read off and obviously take a minute. There's going to be some questions that audiences want to know more about each of you. Starting with Anthony. Now, you've stated you're an acting coach. What steps do you ensure to make sure mental health and emotional well-being are at the forefront of the actors you work with?
I mean, I think that's changed also over the years. You know, when I started 30 years ago, our understanding and our awareness, or even our conversation about it, wasn't what it is now. You know, I think it's always consent and it's always accountability. Like, I think for actors being able, and that's professional as well, not just in their own work, is like being able to say yes or no around the things that they feel comfortable in wanting to do, the story that they want to tell, or the characters they want to play, you know. And I think that there's more agency for artists nowadays to pick and choose, like, oh, that's not really what I want to work on. That's not what I want my thematically, you know, for me to be focusing on. That's kind of how I would answer it.
A great answer, I would say. Quentin, we're off to you. What has the response to White Frog been like for you when it comes to Asian American audiences? And did anything about the reactions surprise you?
Yeah, you know what? I think that it was White Frog was first premiered at the San Francisco it was San Francisco International Asian American Film Festival, which was a camp fest. It was like a world premiere, and it was received really, really well. And then we also premiered the film, I think, in LA with Outfest. So it's kind of like White Frog is one of these really cool films that can straddle both you know, the Asian American community and also like and also the LGBTQ plus community. And then I think that it is through. And it's a movie that actually create these bridges, right? So I'm both queer and Asian, obviously. So I kind of have to it's kind of my job as a filmmaker and artist to kind of bridge these two communities together. And it's fun. It's responded really well. And particularly White Frog was actually pirated because at that point, like, gay films are still outlawed in China. So there are no legitimate gay films. And it's funny that White Frog has this incredible following in China. And just out of like somebody pirated it and would create like subtitles for Chinese, and it was like people know about this movie in China, and it was like ranked really high on Douban, which is this Chinese website. So somehow it got around, and the response has been really good, and it's always touching that later on that I would meet like young, you know, people like 20, 30 years younger than me say, oh my God, really enjoyed White Frog. It sort of made my day. It's like, you know, I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's a very surprising turn that kind of took for you in a very positive way too. Back to Anthony. Why is climate change a mental health issue?
Well, here's the thing. I think I am a practicing Buddhist. I've been meditating for 28 years. So in my moments of equanimity and calm, I see that it's such an existential, it's a hyper object, and human beings cannot get their head around something that does not compute. And so I understand that it creates a lot of fear, just in many ways like COVID did. When you can't control something, your first reaction to something is going to be fear. And so I feel like for me, there is no debate. But if I'm talking about like the two debaters tonight, I think you can look at it one of two ways. So the science is in, and it's been in for like, I don't know, 70 years or so. But even for those people who are denialists, I think we can all agree that it is getting warmer and we're seeing abnormal patterns. So one could say, well, okay, then if it's not man-made cause, and we know that the Earth is getting warmer just by scientific graphs, then that means then the planet is just warming on itself, which means there's nothing we can do about it, which is even scarier than thinking about, well, what is our contribution to the planet overheating? So I think sometimes we don't really break it down into digestible ways for people on both sides to understand it, right? And I don't think people have to be scientists to understand it. I think people are living their lives. We detect something. We're all connected to nature. So I think I just want it to be talked about. It wasn't, I don't think in the 2016, I think debates, I don't even think it was hardly even addressed. And the media had hardly even addressed it up until very recently. And it used to really get me very upset. So I just think, like anything, the more you talk about something, the more it can be recognized. And there are, I'm not bleak about it. I am a pragmatist. I'm pragmatic about it, but there are a lot of people out there who are fighting for solutions. So I think the more we talk about it, the more amazing people with great ideas can come to the table. So that's kind of my
I don't disagree. No, I don't
tempered
disagree.
response to it. Anybody wants to DM me or talk to me more about it, I'm always here.
Now,
But thank you for asking that. I really appreciate
yeah,
it
I know.
because
I sent you with like a loaded
I'm really
question.
passionate about it. Yeah.
No, it's a very, very important topic and issue, and you beautifully responded to that.
And Anna, can I just say really quick too, just about my movie so that it
Yeah.
doesn't make people feel freaked out about, they're really just, my point about telling any of these stories of big topics, it's really just very simple love stories. They're all very human stories, and you get caught up in the love, whether it's queer love or parent-child love or heterosexual love or, non-labeled love, whatever the case is. And then it culminates in an event that makes you, oh, shoot, we're living in the Anthropocene. We're living in a new age where this is going to continue to happen. And how do we continue to love and divorce and have kids and fuck and whatever it is? Because that is something that is happening. It's happening everywhere. So I'm not teaching and preaching in the movie. I just want everybody to know that. Okay, I'm off.
I love to hear it. I love to hear it. Now, to take the hot seat away from Anthony for a hot second, Quentin, we're back to you before I have a question for the two of you. Even though it's been 10 years since its release, why do you think White Frog remains so relevant today? Obviously, you talked about the pirating and so much more, but why do you think it's still at the forefront for a lot of people?
It's interesting because I tend to be a filmmaker that always makes films like 10, 20 years ahead of its time when people at that time didn't appreciate it, but people would appreciate more. And I really think that it comes from the fact that I just and everybody says, oh, which is the film that you feel like you're most connected to? And in fact, like, because I'm an independent filmmaker, never have a lot of resources to make anything. Everything I've made is literally handmade and from my heart. So maybe that could explain why this movie is still relevant and enjoyable 10 years later.
Beautiful response to give. Wow. Made from the heart. Anything else you'd like to express about like the stories you tell and like why they're worth telling?
It's kind of asking you, oh, where does your inspiration comes from? And so much is by fate. For example, I created a series called Comedy Invasion in Canada, which is the spin-off of the Comedy Invasion, the series, the Asian American version of the stand-up series. And I worked with this indigenous comic named Keith Nahaney. And I worked with him and I just felt really connected to him. And then the episode that we made together for Comedy Invasion called Rest Style just won the 2024 Canadian Screen Awards. And then now we're suddenly creating we're making we just shot an independent feature called Rest Comedy, which is an all Canadian, all indigenous stand-up comedy feature film. And Keith is co-producing, co-creating, and co-directing with me. And so much of it is like, if I had never met Keith, I would have never gotten into telling these kind of making this indigenous stand-up comedy feature film. So much of it is fate, and yeah, you just gonna embrace life. Any thing that life throws at you, you feel like it's right, go for it.
I love that I'm always like piggybacking off of Quentin. I think it's like, for me, I think he's totally right. It's fate and the other F word, faith. And I don't mean that in like a religious aspect, although you could take it that way. To me, fate and faith is like continuing to move forward with, the insight or the aha or the impulse or the great idea that you have comes from somewhere. We're all connected to the same story at some level. Again, no matter who we are or where we come from or what we look like or what color we are, it's like there is no new original storytelling, right? What is it to be a human being that's been around since, civilization began and since hominids were here on the planet. They were telling stories, right? I always loved, like, they were writing on cave walls to remember. I mean, that was like the movie making, 100,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago. My handprint is on a cave in France to say I was here. And so I just think, I can't really add anything else. Just keep trusting that the story you want to tell is a story that we need to see because it's yours.
I think that it's ironic that it took me, I would say 40, 50 years to realize what you really needed to is totally trust your artistic instinct and trust what your heart wants to do. And if I had done that when I was 18 years old, I probably would have gone farther, because when you're young, everybody tells you, oh my, don't make this, don't do this, don't do this. And people give you like so much things that so just follow your heart and just do it. That's all. That's the only advice I have.
Just do it.
And Andy, what Quentin is saying is, again, he's so right, because it's not practical, it's not easy, and it's actually really scary because there's no map, because you're forging your own path. It's easy to like come up with something that's been done before in a formulaic way, but I just really respect that he's saying that, because it is scary to trust your own journey, but that's all we're all on anyway, So yeah, it's a great reminder.
There's no roadmap. And sometimes you're just like, you know what, I'm going to pave my own path and go off the beaten path that some people are on and just keep doing what I'm doing. So seriously, kudos and congrats to both of you. My last question for the two of you as well is specifically about, telling these stories. Can escapist stories, where people are not points of conflict, but simply normal, everyday people, and like what we used to consider problems of the past, lead to a shifting perspective for LGBTQ plus people, having same-sex relationships on screen, or having certain key points that we are used to normalizing, but everyday people aren't. What do you think that's going to lead to for, LGBTQ plus people in mental health?
Well, I was just going to say, like, for me in my storytelling, I don't really even usually address that. I don't other than, or at least I try not to. They just happen to be, this happens to be a queer girl or a non-binary girl who's figuring herself out. Like, to me, it's not, I'm gay, but that's only a percentage of who I am. It's 1%. I don't even know how you put it. It's a lot, but then it's nothing. I'm a human being. So I don't know if I'm answering the question. I felt like that's maybe what the question was, but why can't we just all be people? Because at the end of the day, we're all the same. We're working through the same fears and the same hopes. And, we see people that we love die. And, I think it's all the same. So trying to front stories that are the same, regardless of how, what somebody's persuasion is, to me seems like a moot point.
I feel like if you are queer, or you are like, you are different, and the whole idea is that you're trying to understand diversity through difference, just like that you're different, and because of understanding yourself as different, you can understand other people's difference and not assume that we're all a homogeneous crowd, and which is what I think that because there's this word called escapism, which I feel like it is called mainstream entertainment. And I think that it's just, we're moving towards a much more diverse way of storytelling, which I think is really hopeful for me. And because it wasn't like that when I started in the industry back in the 90s, which is like everything, you have to put, it has to be the same story, it has to be kind of like, you can't put non-white people in it. And but now things are really changing. And I think that the discourse is also shifting. So I think it's a really great time to be a storyteller, and it's a great time to be an audience, because you have so much more interesting and diverse content out there.
Amazing. I'm sure everyone's definitely taking notes, taking perspective on what you both have to say. And just so you know, I am very invested in both your stories. I know everyone else wants to follow your journey too. So we've dropped your handles in the chat just so everyone can keep up and check out your work. But where can people find your work specifically? This is the chance for the two of you to proudly and shamelessly plug your projects.
Most of my feature and television series are actually on Tubi. So you can just go on Tubi and put in Quentin Lee, and then a bunch of, in quotes, and a bunch of things will come out,
And I don't think my movie Where We Go From Here, which was on Hulu. You know, they phase movies out. I don't think it's on Hulu anymore, but I think you can find my stuff on Amazon and on Tubi. Yes, but also on Amazon, I think.
I'd love to hear it. Well,
And this new movie isn't done yet, so hopefully you'll be seeing it next year.
keep us posted. Keep us posted on it.
I will. I will. Yeah. I will.
Thank you so much, the two of you, seriously, for this conversation. Xavier also, who joined us all the way from another time zone, somehow made that happen. But thank you so much for all of you for the work you're doing in the space. It is not something that anyone is definitely, you know, taking for a grain of salt. It is something that everyone admits you are both doing great work. So quick notes here on a couple of things coming up. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us for this live stream. We're launching a quick poll, 3 questions. Tell us, was today's event valuable for you? Other things to know, there is going to be a couple shift announcements coming for July and August. If you're a creator, filmmaker, or story executive, reach out to The Shift if you have a mental health movie in the making and want to start a conversation about story consulting. So email is in the chat. Until next time, keep shifting, keep on plugging away. We notice you, we respect you, we love you, and we wish you all the best with this and your future projects. Happy Pride. Thank you so much, everyone, for being involved, and we'll see you soon.
Happy Pride. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Happy Pride, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.